part of discipline is putting yourself in difficult situations, seeing that you have physical and mental discipline. So when life puts us in real challenging situations, we go, I trained for this.
On Monday, I was in Denver. I took an early flight, flew to Denver, gave a talk.
What do you do? How do you do it? Who do you do it for? So we have this very biased time span of what we evaluate success in.
The talk was supposed to be at 1 Mountain Time. There was a mix-up in the calendar. And so right as I was leaving to go on a run, changed plans very quickly, scrambled to give a talk that I had not been able to fully prepare and go through my process for. Earlier in my life, I would have absolutely lost my temper. I would have gotten very upset. But what Stoicism reminds us, first off, we always regret losing our temper. Second, it never really makes anything better. And third, it would have distracted me from the task at hand. Marcus Aurelius in Meditation says, remember, you can have no opinion about this. So I tried to say to myself, it doesn't matter what happened, whose fault it was. I gotta go do the talk, and then I can circle back to it later. The talk went super well. Then I flew home that night. The next day, I had to get up super early and give a talk in Austin. Doing gigs at home is always strange. I get to kind of do my normal routine and then kind of not. I got to take the kids for a walk. I went for my run before the event, but then instead of going to the office to write, I went and gave a talk.
Well, ultimately, it only matters insofar as that we take action in response to it. Nobody ever says, I'm never going to do it. They say, I'll start tomorrow.
Then I came home, went to the bookstore. I had to sign 500 copies of Discipline is Destiny. Then I tried to get some writing in, because if I'm not able to write, I feel like I get stopped up, and it's just not what success looks like to me. So I was able to get at least a couple hours of dedicated writing time in. The idea is you're either a professional or you're not. It's ideal that you get to have things the way you want them all the time, that it's simple, there's no interruptions, but that's not life. And my routine got massively disrupted in this period, but what I'm proud of is that I managed to squeeze in the work when I could. I made a small contribution to the book that I was writing, and that's what really counts.
Why do we do something like a cold plunge? Well, Seneca says we treat the body rigorously so that it is not disobedient to the mind. You know you can handle it. You know you can push through. You know the limitations that your body is telling you are not the full truth, that there's always more left, that you can always do more, that you can always go a little bit longer. So that's what I've been training for, subjecting myself for the last couple of weeks, culminating in this sort of marathon of 3 crazy days.
And then that night, I went to go see someone that I'd actually talked about in my talk on Monday, which is one of my all-time favorite bands, Iron Maiden. Iron Maiden's actually who I've based my career on, changed how I think about art and creativity. There's this amazing quote from Bruce Dickinson that's actually in the talk I give. He says, look, Iron Maiden has our field, and that's what we plow. We can only plow one field at a time. We don't care what anyone else is doing with their field. And that's how this band has lasted for 40 years. They built this huge underground community, millions of people all over the world. So I saw them with my wife that night, and then I had a 5:40 a.m. flight out of Austin.
It's a little after 4 a.m. here in Austin, Texas. I'm exhausted. I saw Iron Maiden play last night. And now I'm about to go do one of the craziest things that I have ever done in my life, which is I'm going to get on a plane, fly to Las Vegas. I have an early morning talk to 500 people. And then I'm getting in a car and I'm driving to Cerro Gordo, which is a ghost town in the mountains of California. I'm going to do a 7-mile run with about 4,500 feet of elevation climb. We're going to see if I'm going to survive. I'm going to take you along this very crazy journey.
I flew into Las Vegas. I got to sleep in my hotel room for 20 minutes, and I gave a talk in Vegas. The joke about Iron Maiden was that this was a band that sold more t-shirts than albums, which it may be true, except for the margins on t-shirts are way better than the margins on albums. Their manager was once approached by a fan in the industry, said, hey, I love what you do. You're one of my favorite people in the music business. And he said, I'm not in the music business. I'm in the Iron fucking Maiden business. It takes an immense amount of discipline to focus on your field. One of the most beautiful passages in Seneca's writing, he talks about the sense of being on your path and not being distracted by the paths that crisscross yours, especially from those who are hopelessly lost. Professionally, creatively, I think Iron Maiden's a great example of that. I try to focus on what I do, how I do it, put what gets me excited, what fulfills me, not what's hot right now, not what's working on the bestseller list right now. I try to be disciplined enough to stay on my field, in my lane, to stay on my path.
Well, I just finished my talk here in Las Vegas. I thought the talk went great. It was really fun. I met some people, talked about amor fati, we talked about building things that last, we talked about legacy, we talked about memento mori, all amazing stuff. It's like the post game.
Yeah.
It was good for me. But just as things start to go great, what does life do? It introduces variables, or as the Buddhists say, it thickens the plot. You ready for this? So the highway is closed. It's washed out in Death Valley, so now it's going to take an extra hour and a half or so to get there. So it's either going to be a 5-hour drive or a 6.5-hour drive, depending on certain traffic conditions. I got to decide whether I'm going to quit. I don't like quitting, so I don't think I am. I'm going to push through it anyway. It's just going to mean the run's going to be harder. It's going to be later in the day. I'm going to be more tired. My legs are going to be stiffer, but as the Stoics say, this is what we train for. This is why we prepare in advance for things to be harder than we think they're going to be. The fates guide the person who accepts them and hinders the person who fights them. Like, that's why there's this rule, don't run to catch trains. As you're rushing, as you're insisting on things being a certain way, you never know that they were supposed to be that way. In fact, it may be, the Stoics would talk about the logos, the idea that we're not in control, that we're put in situation by some larger sort of force of the universe that we don't really understand. When something like this happens and suddenly I'm super delayed, it's going to take longer than expected, maybe the thing I wanted to do isn't possible to do, I try to remind myself that I don't know best and I just need to relax and I need to go with it. Last year we were driving across country, we were on our way to Cerro Gordo, we blow out a tire, we end up having to spend hours and hours in a cemetery as we waited for the camper to get fixed. But my kids, not knowing what we were supposed to be doing, not knowing where we were supposed to be going, what time we were supposed to be making, they just saw it as an adventure. I don't even think they fully realized that we were in a cemetery. I think they just thought it was a park where we ate. Kids have this sense because there is no should, there is no belief that they control reality in that sense. They are better at going with the flow, at seeing the adventure of it. In Meditations, Marcus Aurelius says that life is warfare and a journey far from home. And I think he means this both literally. He spent years at the front, he was often gone. But I also think he means this figuratively. And even in my own life, I'm gone a lot, everything is a battle. But if I may be so bold as to amend Marcus, I would say life is an adventure. It takes you far from home. There are battles, there are quests, feats of strength, there are challenges that you have to face, and you want to embrace it. And when things are difficult, when they don't go as expected, you have to learn how to see the adventure in it. Is the road closed? Oh man. Well, that confirms it. Another road closure, another delay, 34 extra minutes this way. It's an adventure, like I said. You just gotta see it as an adventure. And look, it's fucking beautiful. How is that not an adventure? Look at this. There's a preacher named Witness Lee, and he said, forbearance is the sum total of human virtue. That the key thing that humans have to cultivate in life is the ability to endure, to survive, to hold on, to hold fast to the things that are important to them. That to me is Cato resisting Julius Caesar. That's Marcus Aurelius, stomach ailment, tragedy, plague, thing after thing. Because I'm on this tour for discipline, I wanted to test myself and test my discipline, which is why I had the idea that I would run from the bottom of Cerro Gordo to the top of Cerro Gordo. It was a physical challenge unlike really any I'd done before. It wasn't about speed. It was really about, like, could I push myself? Could I last longer even when I was uncomfortable and tired and exhausted and totally out of gas? The ability to bear, to endure. This is how we conquer. This is how we get through difficult times. This is how we show the world who we are and what's important. You enter Cerro Gordo. It's next to the town of Keeler, California, which is at 3,500 feet of elevation. And Cerro Gordo is at 8,500 feet of elevation. What's crazy about this town, and it's even crazier if you think when you realize that people have been coming up here and they built all this. They brought thousands of tons of silver. They brought building materials. Think about all the stuff that's up here and what they've built. For like 100 years, they did it without the benefit of most machinery. 5,000 feet of elevation climb. My goal was to do it under 2 hours, and I did it in exactly 1 hour, 59 minutes, and like 20 odd seconds. There was so many moments in it when I wanted to quit, when I didn't think I could do it, especially at the end, especially
especially when there was more and more mileage to go. And I'd remember, I've driven up this. Our 4x4 truck overheated multiple times. It was basically just a relentless, devastating uphill for 8 consecutive miles. My body basically quit on me after about 6.5 miles. And so the last part was just sheer gutting it out. When you're doing something for the first time, you have to set a baseline. When I wrote Trust Me, I'm Lying, it was just to see if I could do it. And I know how long it took, what it took out of me. I know where I struggled. I know where the dips were. And everything I do after that is comparing against that baseline. I think the reason that I had such a hard time on the run yesterday, I think I was just freaking dehydrated. The elevation, the heat, I do love elements. You just put it in water, no sugar, dissolves in there, tastes good. 5,000 feet of elevation climb. I just was seeing if I could do it. Maybe a year from now, I'll come back and try it again. I'll push myself. You have to set a baseline first with anything that you do. 1,000 milligrams of sodium, 200 milligrams of potassium, 60 milligrams of magnesium. Actually, the founder is Rob Wolf, who I've known forever. He's a great dude. He is an incredible athlete. He made this stuff to help him. If you want a free element sample pack, they're offering one to Daily Stoic listeners and viewers, and you can get a free element sample pack with any purchase. When you're pushing yourself really, really hard, if you think about how far there is left to go, you can lose heart. And so you try to just put one foot in front of the other. And that's what I was really doing. If I was looking at my watch all the time, if I was looking at how far I'd gone or how far left, I don't think I would have been able to do it. It affected my posture, sort of running, looking down, so my back is a little sore. But I'd rather my back be sore and I made it because I was so heads down focused on what's in front of me than to be disappointed in myself that I lost heart and gave up. I think about the same thing when I'm writing. What do I have to do today? How can I make a small positive contribution to the project today? How can I chip away at it? We assemble our life step by step. No one can stop you from that. If I just kept my feet moving, if I just kept going, if I didn't start walking, I didn't know how long it would take. I didn't know if the 2 hours would work or not, but I knew eventually I'd get where I wanted to go. And when I had Courtney Dowalter on the podcast, she's one of the greatest ultra marathoner, endurance athletes in the world. She talks about when she's running, she says she enters the pain cave.
When I'm running, I'll actually picture the cave holding a chisel and a hard hat and just getting to work on making it bigger.
And what gets her going is exploring the pain cave. How far does it go? What's in there? It's funny, when I was interviewing her, I was telling her about Cerro Gordo. I was telling her about how you walk in these mines, you tunnel way back, and sometimes they hit a stope, it just opens up inside.
So a stope is you're digging, and then suddenly you reach a hollow place inside the rock. So it can be a massive pocket of space and land that you didn't have anything to do with making, but suddenly it's just there. So I imagine it's kind of there. You're chipping away at it. It's super slow going. And then suddenly you're oh.
This is perfect, because I think that is what it's like.
That was something I was experiencing on the run. You're exploring the pain cave, and I was sort of saying that to myself. How far back does this go? What's in here? There are these moments where you discover stuff. Every part of me wanted to not continue to do it, but I made it up to the end, just my whole body shut down from lack of sleep, exertion, a lack of food, and I scarfed down a little bit of food and I just passed out. I fell asleep at 7 o'clock last night. But this morning I woke up a new man, a new lease on life, and I watched the sun come up over the town, which is always incredible and beautiful. Marcus Aurelius talks about looking at the stars or the sun and watching yourself coming alongside it, and I think that's the beauty of a place like this. There's an old diary that Brent, the owner, the guy who lives here, found it, and this woman talked about how even though the town tore apart her family, even though it devastated them financially, she was what I wouldn't give for one more day on the mountain. And every time I'm here, that's what I remember. Then I leave Cerro Gordo, and I've got 2 podcasts today. One with Pete Holmes, who's one of my absolute favorite people, and I think one of the funniest comics in the world. Yesterday, I took a 5:30 a.m. flight from Austin to Las Vegas. I gave a talk in Las Vegas, and I drove from Las Vegas to Death Valley, which took 5 hours because the roads were closed. And then I got out of the car, and then I did that. It wasn't until the end that I was that was too much. That was more than a reasonable person should have committed to.
The first step of the run, I would have been let's do this tomorrow.
Yeah.
I was surprised. I thought of Stoicism. I'm like, all right, I'm going to be quiet. I'm not going to do anything. But there's all this stuff in the book on doing strenuous things. Why is it so important to do strenuous things? You write about it in the book, but I want them to know.
Well, we think we avoid pain by being lazy, but we create pain because we don't have what we want. We don't have the skills or the muscles to do things that should come easy to us, right? We think we're taking the easy way out, but we're really just making it harder for ourselves later.
You might rest. You have to be disciplined about your discipline. I would love to run in LA. It's one of my favorite cities in the country to run in. I have all these runs from when I lived there that I like to do. I'm going to have to deliberately not do that so I can rest, because on Friday, first call time for an interview is at like 8:45 in Venice.
One of our first YouTube videos on this channel was about growth hacker marketing.
Really?
Yeah. You probably haven't seen it. I would actually ask you to please not watch it.
Yeah, because I think we butchered it.
And what's interesting is a lot of the principles in that book, like we still talk about and apply today.
And then I leave, and then I do a 2-hour podcast with Tom Bilyeu.
You are a descendant, literally or figuratively, of people who have endured like unimaginable difficulties and persevered through it. And so can you.
All of that is going to be a really fun opportunity to talk about the book, to hopefully get the book out to people, but most of all, to talk about the ideas. When you write a book, obviously you want it to sell copies. The publisher needs it to sell copies. If you don't sell copies, you can't do it anymore. But really, the purpose of a book, the reason a person would dedicate themselves to an idea, because they want that idea to go out in the world. And so for me, the opportunity to talk about the ideas, to put them out to people, that's the really important thing. The hardest part about this week is how much time I've had to be away from my family. I missed both bedtimes. I didn't get to take them to school. We haven't got to talk as much. I remember last year when it was the first publicity I was doing for a book since the pandemic, we took them with us because I didn't want to be away from them. And this year I couldn't. When Mark Cerullo talks about how life is warfare and a journey far from home, it takes you away from what you really want to be doing, what really makes you the happiest. Actually, the exhaustion and the physical part of it, and the travel and the time zones, the elevation changes, none of that affects me as much as being away. And so I'm excited to go home Saturday and then get back to my actual job, which is writing this next book, because as fun as publicity and adventures are, what keeps me going is the writing. I hope you like this video. I hope you subscribe. But what I really want you to subscribe to is our daily Stoic email, 1 bit of Stoic wisdom, totally for free, to the largest community of Stoics ever in existence. You can sign up at dailystoic.com/email. There's no spam. You can unsubscribe at any time. I love sending it. I've sent it every day for the last 6 years, and I hope to see you there at dailystoic.com/email.